Now this hour we start in Europe, where according to a UK news agency, 154 convicted Hamas terrorists released by Israel under the recent Gaza ceasefire deal are currently staying at the five-star hotel in Egypt. Undercover journalists stayed at the hotel. Among the men that included senior Hamas commanders, ISIS affiliates and convicted bombers. The report says that the former prisoners are living in luxury alongside unsuspecting Western tourists, with some expected to be relocated soon to countries such as Qatar, Turkey and Tunisia. Security experts have warned that allowing these extremists to regroup abroad could pose a renewed global terror threat. The Marriott Hotel Group has not commented on the claims. Meanwhile, the Israeli government said the releases were necessary to secure the freedom of the last remaining hostages in Gaza. We are now joined by Saul Sadka. He's a security analyst and author, and he joins us live from Tel Aviv to discuss this further. Thank you very much, Saul, for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you. I was just wondering, first of all, on your thoughts on this story. Of course, this comes from a news agency in the UK. The location and purpose are not fully transparent, as we know. And of course, these claims cannot be verified by this news channel. However, the broader implications of some of the sacrifices that Israel, of course, made for the Gaza ceasefire, some of which of the prisoners which Israel released were serving life sentences in Israeli prison for terrorism, in order to release those Israel hostages. How does that feed into the longevity of Donald Trump's plan for peace in the Middle East, given that now these prisoners, some that were arrested for terrorism, are now free to roam the region?
Interesting question. Thank you for having me on. I would say that an additional few hundred terrorists, which will be in the Middle East or perhaps even in Europe, is a drop in the bucket to the number of active jihadis who are already currently there. In the UK alone, there are approximately 40,000 suspected jihadis on watch lists, just in the UK. So you're talking around Europe, must be 500,000, with perhaps another 500,000 in Muslim countries and Arab countries around the Middle East region. So a couple of hundred here or there spread around are not posing any particular additional threat, although these are, some of them, battle-hardened, others of them are murderers with blood on their hands. Yet, as you can see, it's really insignificant in terms of the number in total. These all have to be monitored going forward by the local authorities, wherever they will be. The main problem regarding what you asked about Trump's plan is that we have now finished stage one, more or less, right? There's still 13 Israeli bodies held by Hamas, which they're dripping out, and we'll see if that ever comes to an end, or if they will continue to hold on to a few. But even if that is done, stage two of Trump's plan is predicated on Hamas handing over their weapons. And the likelihood of that happening voluntarily is very low. Now, if Hamas don't hand over their weapons, we end up in this permanent limbo stage, which is perfectly fine for Israel and not so much for the Gazan people. And you would imagine also that Donald Trump and his people will also be somewhat disappointed by the fact that their plan is being thwarted by Hamas. And yet I'm not sure that anyone, apart from perhaps the people of Gaza, are going to be disappointed enough with continued Hamas rule over 40% of Gaza that they now control to go in there and fight to get them out. the only people that were previously motivated to do that were, of course, the Israelis. And that was only because the Hamas terrorists were holding on to 20 living hostages and an additional 30 bodies. Remains to be seen if there can be found anyone in the world or any coalition of people willing to disarm Hamas. And that can only be done by force.
Okay, Saul, do stay with us as we have some further related developments, this time coming out of the United Nations, where the Agency for Palestinian Refugees has warned of an urgent humanitarian crisis in Gaza ahead of the approaching winter. The UN agency has said that displaced families in the Gaza Strip can face cold temperatures and heavy rainstorms in the coming weeks, with many in desperate need of shelter and supplies. In a recent social media post on X, the UN agency has stressed that crucial winter materials are stored in warehouses in Jordan and Egypt, but they remain blocked from entering Gaza. Access for humanitarian organizations has long been restricted by Israel, including a ban on UNRWA's participation in relief operations. In other developments, the UN Security Council met on Thursday to discuss the situation in Gaza. Israel and Hamas have reiterated their commitment to the US-mediated ceasefire, despite allegations of violations since it took effect on October the 10th. The deal has so far enabled the release of some Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, the handover of bodies, and also a partial Israeli troop pullback. Okay, Saul joins us once again. Of course, some would argue that we're about 12 days into this ceasefire now. You said phase one is pretty much done, but many critics have said that phase one agreed on the unrestricted flow of aid into the Gaza Strip. Now, on average, 98 trucks have been entering the Gaza Strip per day. Now, the agreed amount was 600, Saul. Now, with the Gaza winter slowly encroaching, the United Nations is saying that these Gazans who now are returning to their homes, 80% of which are decimated to rubble, they will be very much ill-equipped for the winter. Who bears responsibility for that?
The fact that a large proportion of the homes in Gaza are currently destroyed, perhaps 70%, is entirely the responsibility of the groups who rigged them with booby traps, tunneled underneath them, and fired rockets out of them. I think everyone would agree on that. Of course, once you booby trap a house, you have destroyed that house. You haven't destroyed the house when you actually trigger the booby trap. You destroy the house when you plant the booby trap.
Okay, but so what I'm asking is, why isn't the full, as agreed upon, unrestricted aid, the 600 trucks a day, being allowed into the Gaza Strip in order so the displaced population of Gaza can be fully equipped for the upcoming winter months?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I haven't seen the details. I know if you look on the X account of COGAT, C-O-G-A-T, they provide the updated and correct numbers of trucks that are getting in. There are no shortages of any kind of basic necessities, such as food or anything like that in Gaza at the moment. There are plenty of videos that you can find that show restaurants reopening, people having parties. Life is returning to normal in the parts of Gaza that remain relatively untouched, and even within the newly founded refugee camps, the tent cities, where the people who have lost their homes are living. They have no shortage of food. They have no shortage of brand new iPhones, which are available for sale. Whether or not, it is indeed extremely upsetting, and I can imagine how awful it must be that the Gazans are now heading, a lot of them, into their third winter living in tents. And unfortunately, due to the level of destruction, which just the demolition work and the clearing of the land alone is estimated to be will have to take at least 15 years to clear the land to allow a rebuilding. This is going to be the third winter of perhaps many winters for many of these people. But all of this rests on the heads of the people who started the war, who invaded Israel 2 years ago, for no purpose. They had no chance of winning. Their plan was to simply murder people and take hostages.
Saul, there is a ceasefire now, and the agreement, which US President Donald Trump has said that there should be unrestricted aid flow into the Gaza Strip. And I think what UNRWA is saying is that it is unable, given that line has been signed, is that it's unable to deliver those blankets and those necessities to those people, that they can, those people in need can access those goods for those.
I fully encourage any requirements that should be fulfilled. I don't know exactly what the details are. I would say that UNRWA are totally unreliable as a source of information. They were themselves complicit in the attacks on October 7th. They educated 2 generations of Gazans into essentially full-on Nazi propaganda, and many, if not most, of the people who attacked Israel and all the Hamas members were educated in UNRWA schools, and they have been shown time and time again over the course of the war to be using false statistics. I don't know if that's true. In any case, Gazans should be given all the aid that is required. Trump himself actually yesterday came out, I think it was Rubio, his Secretary of State, who said absolutely no chance that UNRWA has any future in participating in rebuilding Gaza. Nobody wants UNRWA involved. No one's serious. They were part of the problem. They won't be part of the solution, I would say.
Okay, Saul Sadka, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Pleasure to speak to you. We will, of course, here on NewsX World, continue to bring you all the updates as that ceasefire plan flows through the stages. We now move on over to South America next, where Colombian President Gustavo Petro has issued a response after the United States imposed sanctions on him, his family and senior officials. While addressing a large crowd in Bogota's Bolivia Square, Petro declared that they do not kneel and will not take a step back. The US Treasury blacklisted the president, First Lady Veronica Acosta, his son Nicolas, and Interior Minister Almedo Benedetti, freezing any assets they hold in the United States and banning them from travel. Petro dismissed the sanctions, saying he has no money or business ties in the US, and accused Washington of undermining Colombia's sovereignty. Let's in fact listen in to some of the Colombian president's statements.
Nosotros no